I didn't want to try explaining something to you before I even understood it myself. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for almost 39 years. I created this channel so that I could share with you the things that I learn in the research that I do out online and in books and articles about multiple sclerosis and where things stand with research and treatment and lifestyle in general. Well, today I'm finally getting around to making a video about neurofilament light chain because I have heard about this and seen videos even, and yet I still didn't really understand it. So I finally have undertaken to get to the bottom of what is a neurofilament light chain and what is it good for. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I found, and I hope that this will help you understand it a little bit better. Well, first of all, what is a neurofilament light chain? And as I went around looking for a good definition of it, I found very quickly that though there's many resources, websites, articles, clinical trials about it, nothing really explained it to my satisfaction, because to me it's got to be simple as well as thorough and accurate. I hadn't found anything that I thought was worthy of being shared. But once I cast my net a little wider than just multiple sclerosis, I found a site that deals with multiple myeloma that gives a really good definition, finally, of what this thing is. When you talk about light chain, for the longest time I didn't even know whether light referred to the opposite of heavy or the opposite of dark. But thankfully, this video makes it very clear.
Our bodies have white blood cells, and one of those types of white blood cells are plasma cells. Plasma cells make immunoglobulins, which help protect us from infections and illness. Immunoglobulins consist of a heavy chain and a light chain. The light chain can either be kappa or lambda. When you don't have enough heavy chains, the free light chains get released into the blood.
Well, good. I hope that helped you. It helped me a lot. But then it still begs the question, how does neurofilament light chain help people with multiple sclerosis, or how could it possibly help us? And I think I found some good information about that. Basically, what it does, it serves as a promising biomarker. Okay, now here's another word that just cries out for a definition, because what's a biomarker? Well, on the one hand, I think we've all dealt with biomarkers every day. We've had thermometers that take our temperature. We've had blood pressure cuffs that measure our blood pressure. We're used to seeing this, and we're used to seeing the numbers that come back on the machines or on our computer screens or what the doctor tells us. But what is a biomarker officially? And I found a good site that had a definition that I liked. Again, it's not from multiple sclerosis, it's from a Huntington's disease website. But let's hear how he defines what a biomarker is.
Thankfully, people much cleverer than me have been thinking about this for a long time. So a biomarker is basically, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with the FDA definition of a biomarker, and then I'm going to come on to my own definition, which I think is better. This is the FDA definition. A biomarker is a characteristic that is objectively measured and evaluated as an indicator of normal biological processes, pathogenic processes, or biological responses to a therapeutic intervention. Your tax dollars at work there, turning a very simple concept into something that nobody understands. This is my definition. It is in the form of a haiku, which is a Japanese poem, and you're welcome to check out the syllable count, but I think you'll find it works. Biomarkers are measures that tell you something if you are careful. So blood pressure is a good example of a biomarker. You can measure it. It's quite easy to measure, and it can be measured quite reliably. And it tells us something about what the pressure is inside your blood vessels, but it also tells us something about your future chance of developing heart disease and strokes. And we also know that lowering your blood pressure, as long as we don't lower it too much, in the right way, produces a much improved future for people who had high blood pressure previously. So blood pressure going from high to normal, we know now from studying heart disease in thousands of people that predicts a much better outcome for those people. But you have to be careful, because in the case of blood pressure, for instance, if you lower it from normal to too low, that can be bad for the brain. So you really have to be careful about what it is you're measuring, and you have to study these things very carefully. You mustn't make dangerous assumptions about biomarkers.
So in watching that whole video and other things, I've discovered that there are basically two ways these neurofilament light chains are tested for and how they can serve as biomarkers. One of them is through the cerebrospinal fluid, which, as we might know from personal experience, has to be collected through a spinal tap, and the other way is through a blood test, which requires a very specialized machine to analyze. But even so, I know what I'd rather take, especially if I had to take this test multiple times over a period of time to see trends in how things were going. I don't think I'd want to do the spinal tap if I could do a simple blood test. Okay, so we would have this information, but then what use might it be? And really, as I've seen in my researching, it looks to me that there are two areas that are being looked at as potential uses for these biomarkers for neurofilament light chains. One of them would be monitoring, and one of them would be prognosis. Now, to take monitoring first, that's the one that probably has more short-term promise anyway, because what it's looking at is the levels in the blood of these neurofilament light chains. That would let us know whether, for example, our therapy was working. If we were on a DMT and they took a blood sample at baseline and then maybe another one sometime later, they could see whether the level of neurofilament light chain had gone up or stayed the same, or preferably had come down. And if it had not come down, they would know right away that the therapy that we were on was not working for us. And that might be quite useful to know. There have been a number of clinical trials that have shown enough reliable results that that is a possibility. Prognosis, on the other hand, that might be a little tough, because I'm not really sure that we know clearly how to tell when something is progressing. With multiple sclerosis, it's always a difficult thing to figure out. Given that everybody tends to be a little idiosyncratic, I'm not sure that they're ready to say that neurofilament light chains could be used to predict the future of our particular course of MS. One thing that I've said over and over on this channel is that no two of us with MS is alike in the course of disease that we have, how long between relapses, or when we go into remission, how long that takes. We just don't know. So I'm not sure that you could use this tool yet to make any real prognosis, although there is some research that's looking at that very thing, and I will make sure to link that below. You can take a look at it, but from everything that I am hearing, it's not ready for prime time yet. One of the problems is that the machines that are used for analyzing neurofilament light in the blood, they're not cheap, and they're not even widely available. I know there's one company, Quantix, I believe, that has designed one that's been used some, and some research hospitals have it, but it's certainly not widely available. And I understand that Siemens Corporation is looking at getting into this field, and Siemens may be able, since they're a very large company, may be able to produce them maybe more cost effectively so that hospitals and doctors' clinics can actually afford them. But in the meantime, they're just not really a viable option for most of us unless we happen to live near a research hospital that has one. But then, of course, to me, the next question I would ask is, will the insurance even cover it? Every one of us has slightly different insurance. Some insurance might say sure, some might say no, that exceeds the cost that we're willing to do, or might be okay with having an initial test with the neurofilament light chain, but then the follow-ups that would be required to do the monitoring that we talked about, they wouldn't want to pay for that. So I don't think it's a good idea to get out on a limb with something and then discover that all of the work that came before was in vain because your insurance company says no when you need to have it cover another test. So again, not exactly sure this is ready for prime time. It's certainly not likely to be coming to you in your location anytime real soon, unless, like I said, you live near a major research hospital. I don't mean to sound negative at all, but I'm going to end this video with a summary statement by Dr. Brandon Bieber. He put out a video recently that talks about I think it's 15 tests that he thinks are more or less a waste of money and time. And one of those is indeed neurofilament light chain.
Number 2, neurofilament light chain. This so-called biomarker of MS is really just a general breakdown product of the central nervous system and can be elevated in numerous neurological diseases, including MS, stroke, and traumatic brain injury. It's true that higher levels are correlated with relapses and worsening disability, but the correlation is very weak. Take a look at this graph showing the levels in people who are healthy controls, people without MS, people with relapsing MS, and then progressive MS. Sure, there's some correlation, but a lot of overlap between groups. So it means something for groups of individuals, but for an individual, there's just too much variability. Take a look at this graph showing an association between the EDSS, Expanded Disability Status Scale, a measure of disability in MS, and neurofilament light chain. It's all over the place. If anyone tries to tell you they can predict your disability or prognosis with this blood test, they absolutely cannot predict anything, nor is it practical to use this blood test to make any clinical decision. So there's no point for you to have it outside of doing research studies on larger groups of people.
Well, okay, I don't know what you make of all that, but my goal in this video was not necessarily to persuade you to tromp right out and ask your doctor to do a test for you, or to put your hopes on what this thing might show. But that term keeps coming up in things that I've been reading and watching, and I thought that might be true for you as well. And at least this time, when you see it again, you'll know more or less what it's all about and whether it's something that you need to even be concerned about right now. Now, this is the state of the art as of late November 2023. Certainly, if things change, I'll be letting you know, because it's, again, another thing that I will watch. I think it's really neat if it would be something that could be part of your routine blood work so that it wouldn't be terribly expensive. But I don't know that right now it would be worth for most of us to go out on a limb for, unless somehow it could be bundled with the cost of the treatment itself. Anyway, you might have a conversation where this comes up with your doctor, and now you'll know a little about it. And that's all I have for you today. So between now and Christmas, don't go too frantic with all of the commitments and the parties and the celebrations and the gift buying and all that sort of stuff. Remember to keep your stress levels under control, because that's important. Quality of life, right? It's the gift we can give ourselves. So take really good care of yourself, and I will be seeing you again in my next video.